it just doesn't make any business sense whatsoever to not really start getting under the skin of how do we deal with and support people to be fully human as well as they can be in the context of work in order that they can deliver the best that they possibly can.
Simon, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I think you're the first guest that's ridden a bike all the way across London to be here, so I appreciate the commitment.
And it was a lot longer than I thought. I thought I was going to be about 8 miles. It turned out to be 12 and a half, but yeah. It was good. Nice fun.
You're really setting an example for Wellbeing, though.
It's good to cycle, hey? I mean, I don't quite know how I'd have got here if I'd had to come by public transport, and I'm sure it wouldn't have been quite so nice, glorious spring day.
Yeah, at least you're nice and awake and lively, though.
Absolutely.
Before we jump in, tell everyone just a little bit more about you personally and your journey to where we are now.
So I am Chief Executive Mental Health First Aid England now. And I'm supposed to be an educational psychologist. That was where I started, but I didn't finish. I fell in love and missed the deadline. And then I've always described my career as an accidental one. I became an expert in sex education because I got a job running a sex education project for young men in the mid-90s, and then worked in sexual health and health education for about the next 20 odd years. Had a stint at the National Union of Students before coming to Mental Health First Aid England in 2018.
Wow. So what was your previous role before this?
Chief Exec at the National Union of Students.
Nice. And what was what attracted you to this new role, I suppose, is the question.
So, having worked in sexual health and sex education, HIV for 20 years, it was really clear that mental health and sexual health and who we are as people are absolutely interlinked. So when this particular job came out, I just thought, all of that sense of improving our mental health literacy as a country, thinking about public health, improving public health understanding was really, I guess it lit the fire in my belly, really. And of course, that was just before COVID. And, all of that need for us all to have the emotional intelligence, the understanding, the helping skills, it's become even more important.
Yeah, now more than ever. Tell everyone a little bit more about MHFA, who perhaps are not aware of it.
Sure. So we're a social enterprise, and we're part of a global network of organisations that deliver mental health first aid training, mental health knowledge, skills and awareness. And we have a primary focus on the workplace. And the workplace really is because adults spend an awful lot of time at work, and work designed well is good for us, but work equally, can be stressful. It can create poor mental health. So trying through our training and consultancy to enable workplaces to be as good as they can be and to support people through purpose, connection, sense of belonging and achievement. But also workplaces because it's where we can learn skills which we can take into communities and into our families, because we know, whether you're parents, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, that these core skills of being able to recognise signs and symptoms of poor mental health, know how to look after your own health and to signpost and support others is absolutely key, in our personal lives and professional lives.
Yeah, I love the fact that you pointed that out, because there isn't one without the other, right? They're intertwined in that way. But many people, especially me growing up in my career, you never really taught a lot of these things along the journey. I can tell you right now, it wasn't part of my manager training or in any way, shape or form. Yeah,
and I think this is where we've got to move to, isn't it? We're on a really exciting journey where actually, 30 years ago, you're right, it was, or 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it wasn't talked about. It was that expectation of the stiff upper lip, and you managed to go into work and you could carry on regardless of what was going on, either in your personal life or if you had a diagnosed mental illness or were feeling mentally unwell. Over time, what we've realised is that just isn't the case. That when you are at work, you are the same person as you are at home, and if you need help and support, that everybody should be able to access that through the workplace. And I'm really pleased you talked about line managers, because in all of our work, what we know is it's the line manager who provides really good support to people, or don't. And if they can provide support, it can be really, really critical. But as you know, Chartered Management Institute finds lots of us end up as managers without having any training to be a manager. And if you've got no training to be a manager, how can you be good when it comes to supporting people around their mental health?
It's so tough, right? I know something you're really passionate about is talking about how we go further beyond just having a conversation around mental health and from a surface level, but build mental health workplaces for everyone. Can you talk about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think there's 3 layers to it, really. The first is that we often talk about a work-life balance. So I guess where I'd like to start is, let's have a balanced life that work fits into. And as we explore where we're going to the future, that sense of true flexibility, that true balance, which is driven by passion, I don't think that work-life balance quite does what we're doing. We're trying to get balanced lives where we can all...
It's more of a blend, right, than a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's driven by that flexibility, autonomy, ability to do things well. We then often get into a situation where people talk about mental health and performance separately, or they talk about equity and mental health and performance separately. And I think from my perspective, it's how do we get all of those things right to drive performance, with a sense of belonging, sense of inclusion, good well-being and performance all fuel one another. And so when we're having a well-being conversation, we're having a performance conversation. We're having a performance conversation, we're having a well-being conversation. But you've got to create the conditions and have the right culture to be able to make sure everybody feels like they belong, everybody feels like they've got the support to be able to achieve.
So it's really important to look at each of those things with a well-being lens, through a well-being lens.
It's a multi-dimensional lens, I guess. It's that we know that when people are satisfied at work, they're more likely to go the extra mile, when they feel like they belong and they don't have to worry about parts of their identity being revealed at work, being scared of it. They can concentrate on the job in hand, that it can operate at the edge of innovation when you've got the support behind you, that you're in an environment that wants you to succeed. And so often we talk about the big discourse is about workplace stress, and we've got to have that conversation. But also we've got to have the conversation, which is, what is the sense of joy? What drives purpose? What drives connection? How can people, feel really satisfied and fulfilled through work, knowing that, if there are issues which need addressing, that they will be done openly, honestly, and compassionately.
Yeah. When you talk about work, how do companies help support mental health through the way we design jobs, through job design itself?
Yeah. So the first thing is, it has to be a whole organisation approach, doesn't it? We have to make sure that we understand the business, we understand what are going to be the things which will drive mental health. Why are people here? Why do people choose to come to work with us? And then to also understand what might be some of the areas which will impact on mental health. Are there peaks and troughs through the year? Are there particular cycles that you go through? Are there particular tasks, which could be done in different ways? So really thinking about not just how do we manage stress when it manifests, but are there ways that we can think about
predict it,
predicting it, but also trying to flush it out of the system. If you think about town planners, the way that town planners will try to build for exercise and light and safety and all of those sorts of things. How do we build into our systems to try to create the best that we can? And then how do we help people to know that this is a place that they will be supported? What do we do through our recruitment, our retention, through our induction, through the values? What training do people have as line managers? What conversations are people having about how people will be able to thrive at work? And then what sources of support are available, whether it's mental health first aiders, whether it's the EAP plan, whether it's people coming in to help around financial well-being. How do people know that you care about them as people? And one of the most important ways of that, of course, is by having those good management connections. And so often people are managing on the side of their desk. Good management takes time. If I'm managing you, we need to have good quality conversations. If you're managing me, I want you to know enough about me to know that, if I look different or feel different or am communicating in different ways, that you can say to me, I've noticed this. Are you okay? And that takes time. And I think some of the way that the world speeds up, and we can open up a laptop and see a load of emails, or we can jump from Teams to Google to Zoom, means that sometimes we're not actually having enough of that time for managers and peers to be supporting one another.
Do you think that hybrid and flexible working has made that more of a challenge? Because I feel like earlier, when before remote and hybrid way of working, I could kind of seeing the team a lot more. I'm picking up those cues and noticing those things more because I'm seeing them, right? I noticed they're a bit quieter, or maybe they're turning up late, or not engaging in meetings. I felt like it's become a little bit more difficult to do that when everyone's so remote and you're behind a Zoom screen, to really pick up on some of those cues, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And on a very personal level, I would say, yes, it is harder. Some people would disagree and say it is possible to do. But I think that we feed off each other, don't we? In relationships and in connections. But I don't think it's impossible. I think they've got to be deliberate and think about how are we still going to make that time for connection, and having conversations with people more deliberately to say, it is harder, but what are the signs? So sometimes people will assume that the camera's off is a problem. It might be, that there is somebody else working at home, or that somebody's eating their lunch, or whatever it is. So it's knowing and understanding. And I guess for me, the question would always be, what can you do in advance in order to know? And having those conversations with people to say, it's obviously going to be a bit harder. What can we do to try to prep for that? And then if you have any doubts, it's asking the question, finding the time to ask the question. I think lots of this comes down to, to having the time, to stopping and thinking, which I guess is one of the other bits, which I do think that hybrid and flexible working and lots of other things have stopped us doing. So when I started work and there wasn't an email system, I couldn't open my computer and do lots of things all morning and think that I've been productive. I can do that now. On a day when my brain isn't thinking, I can pick up my computer. Some of those things may have been relevant, or it may have just been answering people, so feel polite. Whereas really thinking is about joining the dots. It's about having the time to process what's happened and then think, what action do I need to take as a result? So I might notice something in a Teams meeting, immediately jump off that Teams meeting, forget that I've noticed something because I've gone on to the next
Because you got a back-to-back call probably,
So lots of this is about how do we give our brain the time to process things, and again in that sort of moving forward culture which we've got all the time, that we can sometimes forget to process some of the things that have happened. And we started this by talking about the cycle. 12 miles where all I could do was concentrate on staying alive across the roundabout and process some of the things that were happening yesterday was a really great commute, whereas had I been on public transport, I would have been doing emails. So it's what do we build into our day-to-day lives to give ourselves time. And my first boss, Jill Francis, always said, the thing you must never stop doing when you're working is thinking. And everything that we do at the pace of innovation, at the pace that we operate, I think drives sometimes against us just having those percolating thoughts.
Yeah, but to your point though, you have to be intentional about creating that time, otherwise it just won't happen.
Yeah.
Only literally this morning, just before you got here, I wrote an email to my EA. She won't mind me saying this, saying, hey, I need you to stop booking back-to-back meetings because I need some space between. I've got 3 podcasts today and I've got a calls immediately after each one. And I was like, hey, I just need you to book some time so I can have time to process that information. Also take a break as well. But otherwise, I kind of you just go on to the next call and forget about all of the great ideas or insights that was, and I'm later on when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, it's not as clear anymore because I'm just been thrown into another moment, if that makes sense, as well. So I'm like, it needs to be I'm even like blocking out, non-negotiable times for like just specifically just an hour a day just to think. And process and have an opportunity. Similar with my gym time, like your cycle, the gym for me is an opportunity that while I'm working out, just to process and have thoughts and go through ideas or business, or even some of the best challenges I've solved have just been by working out and being like, oh, that's a good idea. Otherwise I wouldn't have had that time to be able to do that.
I think that's true. And I guess the other bit, which is, we're sat here face to face today, and I will remember this on some of the things that we said because of remembering the space. I've not been to the space before. I remember when I came in, I said, oh, we got the grey jumper memo. So, you remember that. So you get all of those different sensory sort of perspectives. So, with that sense of smell, I can remember some things from 20 years ago based on the fact someone wore a green cardigan that I really liked, or that they had, an aftershave or a perfume, which, remember, and it triggers. So all of those connections, which our brain uses to file these catalogues of information, are incredibly important. And those are the things which, it's not to say that the golden days are behind us. It's how do we know those things which our brain uses to help us to process and to perform and to deliver, and then build them into our new ways of doing things.
A lot of what we've been talking about falls on the shoulder of HR in most companies. What can HR do to really help? And is this just a role of HR? It should just be the entire business, because it's obviously HR is taking the brunt of a lot of the work.
It has to be the whole business, but there has to be the leadership. And HR, have got that really great sweet spot where they know about the organizational design, they know about the learning development, they know about the support, they know about people and what sort of issues are coming in. So I think absolutely pivotal role. But then what are your energy waves, I guess, through the business? So we have everybody at MHFA England who's trained in mental health first aid skills. So we don't have mental health first aiders, but that if there's somebody that you trust and you want to have a conversation, they'll be trained to do so. I think we often underestimate the power of peers and don't have those conversations about what is our responsibility as individuals within a business. We're all part of building the right culture. We're all part of building, and I guess for HR, it's how do you use those different levers which are available across the business. And so often there are people who are passionate about whether it's mental health, whether it's about diversity and inclusion, whether it's about ensuring that people have got the support that they need. So we all come to work with different drivers, with different personality types, and how do we maximize those? But again, it's coming back to how do we make sure we know who we are as human beings? How do we make sure that we know what gives us satisfaction and where we're willing to put in the extra mile? And whether that's through champion networks, whether that's through specific roles, whatever it is, and often it's driven by lived experience.
As a chief exec yourself, what advice would you give to HR leaders about how to engage the business, engage the senior leadership team, get their buy-in, as it were?
About mental health specifically. So the key bit about this is it is not separate from performance. If you look at Deloitte's research, which they do every 3 years, the cost to UK business, and I'm conscious this is global, but from UK business is £56 billion per year. The cost just of mental health when that's modelled. And that is through presenteeism and leavism as much as it is through absenteeism, which of course is where people always think it's going to be. And one of the things that has shifted, and that's risen incrementally by 9 billion over each of the last 3 year periods. So over 6 year periods, that cost is driven from 36-ish billion when I first started working in mental health in 2018 to 45 and up to 54 or 56, can't remember. And That was before COVID. So we've now got the next lot of modelling. So there is a moral issue, and I think that lots of businesses are clear about the moral cost, the moral driver, and the human cost and the human driver. But there's also a performance and a business and a bottom line driver. So what that research shows is that for every £1 you spend, you get £5.40 return on investment. And if you just take that as a mental health, there's then also further modelling, and I don't have the exact figures, but about the impact of alcohol use. There's then further figures about the impact of domestic abuse. There's then further bits on racism and sexism, all of which, when you put them into a holistic framework, think about what we're saying about mental health, equity, performance, all driving each other. It just doesn't make any business sense whatsoever to not really start getting under the skin of how do we deal with and support people to be fully human as well as they can be in the context of work, in order that they can deliver the best that they possibly can. So that would be my pitch. The starting pitch would be moral, human, but also business, and you put those three together, and it just is unthinkable that there is anything other than an urgent need to continue doing what we are doing.
The numbers are staggering that you just shared. My concern is because I think during the pandemic we saw a lot of investment and we saw a lot of focus on well-being, but it feels like we're now sort of going back a little bit from the conversations I'm having. I speak to global heads of wellbeing every day from global brands. Their budgets are being cut. So my worry is that we struggle to sustain the momentum that we built. It's almost like a silver lining in the pandemic of this spotlight was shone on wellbeing. We launched our global wellbeing summit and couldn't believe we had 3,000 executives join that. So I was like, wow, okay, clearly. But now it seems to be, I don't know if you're seeing this, I'd be interested, you're closer than I am, that there seems to be the momentum that we got, we're struggling to sustain.
I think this is probably one of those yes and answers, that certainly in some of the work that we've done, what we're hearing people say is that they're getting less check-ins around well-being from their managers. And I think some of the other stuff feels integrated. We get used to what's there, and we all know that when something's new and it's shiny, we recognize it and we see it. And other times when it's integrated, it can just become part of the background noise. Or we're going, and what next? And what next? And I think there is a really important job now of consolidating what we do and to think about it in sort of three buckets, if you like. One is what do we do and how do we support everybody to be fully engaged and well and to feel like they belong and that they're psychologically safe? What do we do in order to help people at particular periods of time, whether that's through a period of poor mental health, through bereavement, through whatever transition, through chronic illness, etc. And then how do we make sure that workplaces are great places to work for people who have a severe or enduring mental illness? And if we've got that clarity about what it is we're trying to do, then we can make sure that we're operating across the spectrum to really address particular issues at particular times. And I guess there are so many things which people are trying to do. It's what do you think are going to be the 2 or 3 things which will make the biggest difference that you can build on incrementally over time? And that feels to me about where we are right now. It's how do you make the budgets work? How do we use what we've learned to really drive ongoing success? How do we integrate mental health into line manager training? How do we integrate mental health equity inclusion into induction processes so that it becomes just part of everything that we do? And how do you make sure that you've got champions, first aiders, whatever it is, as part of your infrastructure, and then building that on an ongoing basis?
One of the challenges I hear from leaders is around how do you communicate this internally? Because a lot of friends and colleagues that I speak to, until they're not even aware of the support that they even have, because it's somewhere in an intranet somewhere, or the benefits that they have. And I'm wondering what are some of the creative ways or impactful ways that you've seen companies do that to really build some momentum? Obviously getting internal champions and some of the things that you mentioned, but is there any other cool things that you've seen that really worked and that was really a creative way of approaching it?
So one of the things I would just start here is we do also have individual accountability. It does worry me sometimes that we sit and say, oh, we haven't been told, we don't know. Yeah, the reality is that for most organisations now, there is some sort of support, and I recognise there are always, outliers into that. But what we mustn't do is always be saying, and what does the business need to do? What does the business need to do? I have a responsibility as an individual. We have an app, and it has offers as part of the app. Now, I'm the chief exec, as part of the signing off this process, and I knew that offers were on it. I've had it for a year. I didn't have a look on those offers nearly as enough as I should. That's not me as chief exec's fault. That's me as Simon Blake, who doesn't look to see whether I can get cinema tickets and whatever it is. So there is something here where we have to have a conversation, which is what is the individual's accountability and what is the organisation's accountability. When it comes to the organisations, there is something about curation and ongoing repeating, because I don't look for support until I need it, and then and I don't know where to find it, all those sorts of things, and people don't hear. So also, even on your EAP, people don't know what it can offer. So we have to keep on repeating that. And you and I were having a conversation before we started about curating information. There is so much information.
That's sometimes the problem.
That actually you go, well, I don't know where to look. And so I don't know, we have to be creative. I think we have to be repetitive. And whether that's in every single internal newsletter. I do a message to all staff every Friday, and we'll regularly say a reminder that this is here. Sometimes people will talk to me and say, oh, I used this through the app, and I'll say, oh, I was talking to somebody the other day who said they'd use this, just to remind people that it's there. And again, just becomes part of what we do every single day.
Yeah, I'm seeing companies get really creative. Obviously, the standard stuff of having that conversation in your one-to-ones, or having it at your town halls where it's digital or virtually, and making that part of it to have just as a reminder. I'm also seeing companies create their own podcasts as well, like DHL. Lindsay Bridges, who's their global VP of HR, does a podcast around wellbeing and DEI, where she has conversations with different executives and other leaders and employees in the business, and they just post it out on all the different platforms publicly. So you can get an insight. So making it going to employees rather than trying to bring them to you. They're using Spotify, they're using YouTube, just put it out there. They're using LinkedIn, and she's seen amazing results of something as simple as that. Doesn't cost a huge amount of money, but it's very authentic as well. And
I think that's the point, isn't it? They're using all the different platforms, and not expecting it to reach everybody. That's the other bit in this, that I see quite a lot about people saying, oh, only 10% or only 5%. Well, 5%, 10% is a good percentage. They may be the people who needed it in that moment. And as long as we keep on going, it might be 5%, 10% each month who are accessing it, but it's probably going to be some different people. So if you were able to disaggregate that and to think cumulatively, and also, ensuring it's part of the everyday conversations is the reality, that we know that if people have a good experience of something, they will tell their teammates. So making it good.
You mentioned DEI earlier. We kind of come up a couple of times. Why is it so important for us to bring together DEI and well-being, and what's the sort of the impact that could have?
Well, I guess different people have different experiences at work, don't they? We know that some people get promoted easier, get their voices heard easier. Some people feel as though they're unable to speak. Some people think they'll be judged by what they wear. all of those things impact our experience, of being in the workplace. The gender pay gap, the ethnicity pay gap is all part, in my mind, of workplace well-being. So when you look from end to end, and we're really talking about workplace mental health, it's what are all the things that are going to make people feel like they belong, that they can trust that they will have a fair and just experience at work, and that they will experience equity of value, of contribution, whatever the different roles are, that they feel that. So for me, they're so intrinsically linked. As a gay man who grew up in the 80s, I went to work and I was scared about what people's response would be like to me being gay. And over time, I've learned that other people's response may not be anything, but some of those things that I learned in the 80s and 90s still sit with me as you go in. So again, I have personal responsibility in this, but as workplaces, we know that structural inequalities exist, and we know that they impact on the way that people experience things and the way that people are responded to. So what can we do to try to use that understanding to bring it through? So I guess for me, it's impossible to not have them together. We know more and more about neurodiversity and neurodivergence and people's experiences. And I was with Atif, who runs Ability and Disability based in Brighton, and he was saying, people often talk about whether you need reasonable adjustments. I think it's a much better question. He says it's a much better question to ask, what do you need to be able to be really good in this workplace? And we'll see what we can do to try to make that happen, so that it doesn't start with a norm, and is it reasonable for us to adjust?
Reasonable adjustment doesn't.
But what do you think you're going to need in order to be brilliant here? It's just a nicer way of saying it.
Also a different way to frame it as well.
Yeah,
that way.
And it goes for everyone, because actually we all have different ways. That might be caring duties, it might be particular ways that we process information, think about information. It just gives everybody the chance to really think. I mean, if have you ever been asked that as you go into workplace, how can we help you be brilliant here?
No. One of the things I have started doing though when I'm hiring people is having that conversation similar to that of like, how do we get the best out of this relationship? And just asking someone a few questions around that. And I found that that's kicking off expectations. Sometimes I've realized, our expectations weren't actually aligned. And the way I thought you like to be communicated to is definitely not how I've been doing it. So these assumptions that sometimes that we make, now I'm trying to, from very early on in relationships, have all of those conversations, and it just sets you up for success. Because sometimes it's just, you were just misaligned. Both your expectations were not aligned, or I was giving feedback to an employee for like a year, and recently we had a conversation. It's like, no, I actually prefer to be given feedback like this. And I was like, oh God, this entire time I've been thinking that's how you, or I had another employee that whenever we would do like an awards or celebrate success, he doesn't like being publicly, doesn't like that to be received publicly. His idea would be one-on-one. He feels more, it's personal, and wow, Chris really sees me, as opposed to this public setting. So just sometimes like just having those conversations and understanding those things are huge for people. Whereas I early on in my career, and still make that mistake now, make assumptions that could really...
Well, we learned certain things, didn't we? So I always learned that if you were giving difficult feedback, it should always be face to face. And I remember one colleague just said, I'd much rather have had this in an email and then come to see you in half an hour's time, because
interesting,
I would have had time to process it, to have had my immediate emotions on my own, and then to be able to come in and have a conversation. So there are all sorts of different things. I increasingly am saying to people, please don't WhatsApp me work things, because WhatsApp only goes on my phone, and that is really just feels like it needs an immediate response, whereas actually need it. LinkedIn similarly, that LinkedIn inbox, etc.
People know to me that, Chris, I messaged you on LinkedIn, and I'm like I'm just gonna get lost. And it's even more challenging now, right? Because you got Slack, you got WhatsApp, you got email, you got LinkedIn message, I've got like 5 different inboxes in different platforms, And it's important that we communicate. Like, how would you like to like?
Don't you love it when somebody WhatsApps you to tell you they put a LinkedIn message which they've also emailed you about, and then when you haven't responded within 7 minutes, go onto Facebook Messenger as well?
Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, it's tough. That's another thing that also, from a wellbeing perspective, it can become overwhelming because it's like you're always on, right? And it's important, even if something simple at the bottom of your email, just to say, these are the times that I work, and just be thoughtful about that as well. That is also where technology can help. Slack, you can set times, hours, or your emails, you can set a message that will let someone know that you're in X time zone. Just like little things like that. I've on our software, I even get prompts saying, "Are you sure you want to send this, Chris?"
Yeah.
Because this person's here. I'm like, oh, actually, thank you technology for helping me not make that mistake. Small things like that can really help.
There's all sorts of things, but I think this comes back again, doesn't it, about this is where, as individuals and our line managers and our business, we have to work together. So last night I went to an awards do, and on the way home I was doing some emails, and I had a choice, which was either send them at that point or to try to put them in my draft folder. And then I remember, and I thought, I'm actually working. It is 10:30. I don't mind people knowing I'm working, but are they going to have their device? And then am I responsible for somebody having their device open? So I think it's navigating new rules, isn't it? Finding new ways, saying, if I'm sending it at 10:30, doesn't mean it's the most important thing. It means that I'm on the DLR and I've got 20 minutes, which I'm not going to have tomorrow. So,
but you may think that, right? But then they're going to feel obligated to reply. That's the issue.
Well, that's the conversation that we've got to have.
Exactly. So for Shane, my co-founder, it doesn't matter what time. We're going to message each other, call each other. And we made a mistake when we started building the company that everyone's going to be okay with that. And we really realized that, man, but they don't own the company. They're not going to be, like, we literally message each other sometimes like 1 a.m. and we're both excited about it. But not everyone's going to be really excited about things that we are as well.
And there's boundaries, aren't there, and all those sorts of things. But I think it is important that we don't say 9 till 5 is the norm. Anything outside of 9 to 5, we must pretend it doesn't happen. If we are truly going to say we want flexibility and autonomy and to trust people. But it means that we've all got to find ways to have the conversations about, I used to do some things on Sunday mornings because I got up early and had some time on Sunday mornings. And somebody said, these must be the most important things because he's doing it on Sunday morning. They weren't. They were the mindless things which I could do on Sunday morning while I was cooking breakfast or doing whatever. So again, it's that bit of not allowing assumptions and misunderstandings to develop.
It's really important. Interesting question. Randomly came to my mind. When we talk about mental health and well-being at work, what are the things that people aren't talking about enough in your mind that they really should be talking about?
So the one thing that I worry about is that in creating more hybrid and flexible working, we often talk about what is the benefit of being in the office. Whereas I think the question which I'm interested in is, what is the benefit of your home being your home and not the place that you work? So for me, my home is the place where I would often metabolize work or do the fun things rather than actually do the work. And that obviously shifted and changed during COVID. And I recognize entirely that the world has changed. But sometimes I think the question which we ask is all about what are the benefits of being in the office? And there's a question for me which is what are the benefits of being out of your house? And they're quite different questions. And it will be different for everyone. And it will be really important to hear. And I guess for me, I often hear these polarized views, on what is right, rather than some real conversations. And we know that our brains need time to process things. We know that we need downtime, and movement is a really important part of that. So again, isn't everyone needs a commute. Nobody needs a commute. Everybody should get up what do we need to know about the neuroscience of our brains to understand enough about how it manages to process information, how we manage it to rest, so that we're not creating a scenario where some of the things which we used to take for granted, for most people, or for those who are lucky enough to have safe homes, home was a really good protective measure from workplace stress. That shifted. Movement, relationships, connections. How do we navigate our way through all of those things with an understanding of what they brought, and not saying there's only one answer, which is everyone go back, but what are the answers which enable us to keep what we need in order to help people to be mentally healthy? And I think that big one about what role did our homes play in supporting our mental well-being when we weren't using them for work as much as we are now?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's going to differ for everyone. Let's just be clear on that, right? And for me personally, I really struggled working from home because work for me was, building a business is stressful. My life is pretty, running a million miles an hour. So home for me was a place to relax, recharge, unwind, my safe space. When I then mixed both and I was at home, I felt kind of trapped almost. I was saying to my wife, I feel like I'm trapped in my own home in that sense. And I started struggling with anxiety attacks and depression, and just really, really struggling. I had to sit down with Shane, my business partner, and say, I can't do this. Like, I really want to be, I need to separate it for me. And since doing that, it's been a game changer. But I appreciate not everyone can do that, and everyone has their own different circumstances. But I like the separation of when I leave the house. It's a mental shift between when I walk through the door, but I also just love collaborating with my team as well. So I choose to take the time to travel here to be in person. But some of my other employees are completely opposite. They love the fact that they can be at home, more focused, they're closer to their children, many other different things as well. But I feel like you've got to figure out what works best for you. And for me, it's definitely separating the two. I love going home and home being home, where I could just forget about it and just be lost in the moment. And whereas it's hard to do that when you're walking from one room to the next room in your own home. I maybe some people can do like mental switch, but I personally couldn't do it as well.
Well, and it will be different for everyone, but there are some common factors. So if you leave your computer on the kitchen table, as I often do, because I really enjoy the mix of home, then your brain sees it and it connects something. It may be the highlight of the day, it may be the thing you've forgotten to do, it may be the difficult conversation. But the other bit, Professor Laurie Santos, who's at Harvard University, will say, remember, our brain doesn't always know what's good for us. That sometimes we are tricked and we build habits very, very quickly, and sometimes we need kicking ourselves out of those habits. So, sometimes, people say, "Oh, it was really tiring because I was out all day," and of course, being physically tired, you may have taken energy from it, but be physically tired, and tiredness helps you to sleep, and good sleep helps you to be able to. So, it's just talking through all of those things. But I absolutely agree with you. There is no one size fits all, but we need to be having the conversation and not just accept status quo and to keep trying new things. We're going to be learning stuff for a very, very long time. We're not going back, we're only going forward. So what is it that we've got to keep and take and build going forward? And I guess the other bit which have been there is, for me, people who have started to work, started their careers in a time when everything is up in the air. What addition are we doing in order to make sure that they have the support that they need to be able to develop habits, working habits, which support their well-being, which support their performance, which enable them to develop and grow, which enable them to contribute, to share and to learn? And again, that there is no one way, but I'm sure lots of us learnt by overhearing people and by copying people and by identifying people that were going to be people we wanted to mentor us, either formally or informally. And so how do we create those opportunities and make sure that we're not reinforcing and locking in problems which will come up 5 years, 10 years time.
Yeah. Listen, I could talk about this forever with you. Parting piece of advice before we let you go. What would be your parting advice to our audience, which are predominantly HR leaders, with employees all over the world, right? The global brands typically, and also where can people connect with you if they want to reach out to you personally?
Yeah. Let's do the easy question first. How do people connect with me? So at Mental Health First Aid England, our website is mhfaengland.org, and we can be reached via that. And similarly, LinkedIn, MHFA England, is probably the easiest ways to do so. And very happy if we can put that in the show notes. That would be great. In terms of the single piece of advice, I guess for me the bit is, isn't this amazing that we're here having this conversation? That's and true. Let's enjoy the conversation and the process, starting from that sense that we are so much further on than we were 10 years ago, and we're going to be so much further on again in 5 years' time. But at its heart, all of this conversation has to be designed around work designed well is good for us, and that our job therefore is to design it as well as we can and make sure there's support when people need it. And if we can all come to the table with that mindset, work is great. Yeah. But you've got to have that sense of, we want to really be focused on well-being, have it at the heart of a performance strategy, and make sure that when people need support in whatever way, in whatever shape, it's there and it's available.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And yes, for everyone listening, all of those links are below. Also, you're on LinkedIn yourself?
I am on LinkedIn myself, Simon Blake, Mental Health First Aid England. I don't know if you had...
Wherever you're listening and watching right now, all the links have been in a chat, but I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, I love the work that you're doing, and I'm really interested for organizations to connect with you and the team as well, because you already work with so many amazing organizations that impact millions of people's lives. So a pretty good reason, a good purpose to get up every day and do and go to work, right?
Absolutely. And we trained our millionth person in the last couple of weeks. Since MHFA England was born in England, we've trained 1 million people. There we go. So that was quite a milestone.
That's incredible. I can only imagine the ripple effect that has on everyone else as well.
Actually, can I say a cheeky thank you to anybody who is mental health first aid trained, who's doing that help and support and looking after themselves today. So thank you all for all the work that you're doing. And thank you for having me.
Thanks. Wish you all the best until next week.